Starting off this countdown, we have TJ Lane. Back in February of 2012, 18-year-old TJ Lane entered a high school in Ohio and shot 3 students. He injured 3 others. There was no motive for his actions, and during his trial, he showed no remorse. In fact, during his sentencing, he was absolutely ruthless. He entered the court wearing a light blue button-up shirt, which he removed to reveal a white t-shirt with the word "killer" written on the front of it. If that's not bad enough, at one point he turned to the courtroom, said some obscene things, and then gave them a middle finger. You can see that he just doesn't care. It's scary how he shows like zero emotion, and he killed people. In our 9th spot, we have Chaylin Funes. 18-year-old Chaylin Funes was ruthless the night she killed a man named Eric Fisher. That night, she hit Fisher with her car, slamming him through a fence. Then she backed up, hit him again, and then dragged his body down the street. This was all witnessed by the man's family. During her sentencing, she broke down reading an apology note to the Fisher family. But the judge did not buy her apology. He even called her out, saying, and I quote, "The tears I'm seeing from the defendant are crocodile tears." Didn't matter how much she cried and choked on her words, she was still sentenced to life in prison. Moving on to number 8, we have Dylan Shoemaker. But before I go any further, you know the drill. Hit that like button, subscribe, and hit that bell notification button. Just do all that. It really helps us out.
I didn't mean to hurt him.
17-year-old Dylan Shoemaker was arrested and convicted of murder and abuse of his girlfriend's child. He was asked to babysit the child, but when his girlfriend returned home, he had been killed. Apparently, the kid wouldn't stop crying, and so he turned to extreme measures. But in court, Dylan was the one that couldn't stop crying. He burst into tears while delivering his final statement. Now, apparently before he entered the courtroom, he told the guards that they should watch the performance that he was going to put on. So it could just be that him crying his eyes out was all just one big act to get out of his sentence. Didn't work though. Coming in at number 7, we have Jacob Morgan. In 2015, Jacob Morgan set fire to his house that led to the death of his younger brother. Now, Jacob argued that he didn't do it intentionally. The fire was an accident and he tried to save his brother, but before he knew it, the whole home was engulfed in flames. But Jacob loved playing with fire, and weeks prior he actually set his room on fire but was able to quickly put out the flames. In court, Jacob could not keep it together. While bawling his eyes out, Jacob can be seen praying. And then, when he gets his sentence, he freaks out even more.
I am going to find that there is probable cause to charge the individual with the Download for General Sessions Court for both charges.
Moving on to number 6, we have Antonio Barbeau. Antonio Barbeau was only 13 years old when him and his friend killed his great-grandmother. Apparently, the two wanted money for pizza and weed and thought to do so by killing the grandmother and stealing her money and jewelry. Let me repeat that again. They killed an elderly woman all for pizza and weed. That's ridiculous. Well, both were found guilty, obviously, and sentenced to life in prison with eligibility for parole in 36 years. During Antonio's hearing, he breaks down while reading his statement. His lawyer then had to finish it for him.
I took away someone's mother, their grandma, sister, friend, when I had no right to do so.
We're now at our 5th and halfway mark with Fernando Salgado. So in 2012, Fernando attacked one of his classmates with a weapon, and then he tried to insert another up the classmate's rectum. As a result, he was charged with assault with a deadly weapon and 1 count of attempted assault with a foreign object. After receiving his sentence, Fernando broke down. He can be heard begging to let go when he's seen fighting with the guards. He's resisting with all his might, trying not to be put in prison. In our 4th spot, we have Spencer Lewis. Spencer Lewis was involved in an armed robbery gone wrong. He attempted to rob 2 brothers of their weed, money, and video games, but Lewis ended up shooting and killing the 2 brothers. He said he got scared during the robbery and that's why he fired. On Spencer's hearing, he entered the court smirking, acting all cocky and confident, which later turned into tears.
The victim's family, I never went there with that intention of hurting them.
But after his little breakdown, he can be seen leaving the court, smirking once again to the camera. So was it all just an act? Maybe. Moving on to number 3, we have Keyshawn Mann. I think this teen has to be the youngest convict on the list. Keyshawn Mann was only 13 years old when he shot and killed his mother's boyfriend, Jermell Stokes. He claimed that the boyfriend was mistreating him. Back in 2012, Keyshawn grabbed his mother's handgun, snuck up behind Jermell, and shot him in the back of the head. But his defense argued that the shooting was accidental. After he received his sentence, the courtroom went crazy. Keyshawn's family members were yelling and screaming, saying that he's innocent. And then one man got tackled and then removed from the court. Coming in at number 2, we have the collapsing duo. In this video, you can see Erica Mae Butts and Shanita Latrice Cunningham both resisting being taken away after learning that they would spend the rest of their lives locked away. Now, Landon and I did react to this video in our courtroom freakout video, so go check that out. But now I did some research and found out what they were in for. So Erica and Shanita were convicted of killing a young girl back in 2009. Apparently they were looking after her, but instead were torturing her for 2 weeks straight. That just makes me sick to my stomach. Well, in this video you can see the two flop to the floor and refuse to get up after hearing their sentence. In fact, one of the girls had to be placed in a chair and rolled away. While this is all happening, one of the girls' mothers is just completely freaking out. It was just complete madness in that courtroom. And in our number 1 spot, we have Shondell Jackson. In 2009, 19-year-old Shondell Jackson was convicted of first-degree intentional homicide and robbery of a university student, Nathan Potter. During the attempted robbery of Potter, Jackson and his partner fatally shot him to death. During most of his trial, Jackson kept his cool. He showed no remorse for his actions, and at one point he even turned and smiled at the victim's family. But after being sentenced to life in prison, his demeanor quickly changed. Apparently he became angry and started cursing at the judge. He stood up to leap at the judge, but officers were there to quickly take him down and then pepper spray him.
Starting us off on this list, in at number 10, we have a teenager, Aaron Schmidt, who was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole for murdering his 14-year-old neighbor, Elena Callahan. If for some reason Schmidt outlived his sentence, he will have an additional 5 years on his sentence. So that 5-year sentence will run consecutively after any other sentencing he might receive in the future for a possession charge. He will also have another 10 years of a sentence for theft, and again that's going to start after all of his other sentencing has been completed. After sentencing, it was actually appealed to the Georgia Supreme Court due to what in people's opinions were saying the sentence was cruel and an unusual punishment. But the judge rejected all the arguments in court and said he finds the evidence it was sufficient enough to find Schmidt guilty beyond a reasonable doubt of his crimes, and the punishment, it fit the crime. Number 9.
We have breaking team coverage this evening. One of the brothers accused of murdering his 5 family members in Broken Arrow will spend the rest of his life in prison.
This right here is 16-year-old Michael Beaver, who with his older brother Robert Beaver killed their parents and 3 siblings during a spree. Is this real life right now? This is just so messed up. So now, living a life without his parents, he will see the inside of a prison cell for the rest of his life. Beaver's 2 younger sisters, one being just 5 years old, was attacked in what was described as the worst single criminal event in the history of Broken Arrow City in Oklahoma. I mean, that is just so messed up. Beaver was convicted of 5 counts of first-degree murder for his role in the killings. His lawyer did try to defend Michael Beaver, saying that it was his older brother that planned and led the murder. His older brother he took a plea deal to his crimes, and he was sentenced to life without parole. By pleading guilty, Michael's older brother Robert avoided the death penalty. Michael Beaver was also sentenced. His lawyers couldn't get him off the hook to this traumatizing event. Number 8.
Now at the heart of all of today's proceedings was the issue of parole. Judge Edward Lukemeyer, who's presiding over the case, said at the outset that the issue is determining whether White fits in what he called the narrow subset of juveniles who deserve a life sentence without parole.
Well, for teenager Dakota White, he fit the narrow subset of juveniles who deserves a life sentence without parole, according to a judge. It seemed like Dakota didn't feel remorse for what he has done during a few recording phone calls of him bragging about his murder that he committed. There didn't seem like a chance of rehabilitating this teenager, so that's when he was given the harsh sentence. During the trial, it only took jurors about 15 minutes to come up with the deliberation of guilty. He was found guilty of stabbing and shooting Sam Poss to death. He was just 17 years old at the time of the murder. Number 7. We have 17 years old at the time of his crime, Joseph Spencer. He pleaded guilty to 3 first-degree charges in the deaths of his parents, and this is during Labor Day weekend. Joseph went on a killing spree. He was given 2 life sentences after he was tried as an adult. He will have to serve 2 life sentences concurrently, so one after another. And then when that's done, he has to serve his 3rd sentence. Spencer's dad was a UPS pilot, his mom was a science teacher, and I'm pretty sure this kid deserves to never see the light of day. Moving into number 6, we have 14-year-old Colton Glenn Orr. And he was 14 at the time of his crime. He pleaded guilty for shooting and killing his father's fiancée, Laura Hendricks, and this took place in their home. He was sentenced to life in prison. Right after the murder took place, the teenager just walked into a police station and he confessed to everything he has done. The Oklahoma Court of Criminal Appeals ruled that Orr should be tried as an adult, so he was given life in prison. Right now there are appeals to try to have this teen tried as a juvenile, but that's most likely going to be denied. Orr's lawyers are trying to argue that abuse that was done to him was the reason that drove him to commit these awful crimes, but that was quickly discredited. At least now he's gonna have a very long time to think about what he has done. Number 5.
Robert, we do begin with breaking news for our viewers in the West. We want to show you these pictures. Aerial shot of a middle school in Noblesville, Indiana. What has become a familiar scene. Students appear to be evacuating, running from their own school after reports that there has been a shooter there at Noblesville West Middle School.
Hearing about school shootings, it really upsets me, and I'm sure it upsets a lot of you guys. It seems way too common. Teens seem to be able to get their hands on guns like way too easily. There has to be some sort of gun control laws that makes it harder for citizens of America to get guns, or just even ban them altogether. I know it's a huge debate. There hasn't been a mass shooting in Australia who has banned guns like 20 years ago, but I know it would be close to impossible to ban all guns in America. Going back to this story, we have a 13-year-old in which his identity, we actually don't know it. He is a minor, so his identity is protected under the law, in which I think is kind of stupid when you think about it. This teen was capable of committing murder. Why then we're trying to protect him? Well, he will remain in the state's juvenile detention system until he's 18 years old, and then he's going to be transferred to an adult prison where he's going to serve out the rest of his sentence. Because he showed no remorse for what he has done, it's likely the teen will never leave prison. Moving into number 4, we have Taylor Lane Gwaltney, who was just 19 years old when he committed the murder, and then he bragged about it. The took place in Colorado Springs, where the teen attacked a homeless man with a baseball bat. The homeless man was 55-year-old Doyle, who is to death. Doyle was discovered earlier that morning, partially wrapped in a sleeping bag. He had been hit on the head at least 4 to 7 times. During the trial, a 7-man, 5-woman jury took just 2 hours to convict him. The hearing trial did take 3 weeks, so the jury had to listen in onto some pretty horrifying details about the crime. Well, the teen was convicted of the murder and he was sentenced to life in prison, and he showed absolutely no remorse for what he has done. He bragged to 16 people about the murder. Well, at least he is now living in the right place for the rest of his life. Next up, number 3, we have 17-year-old Gavin Ramsey, who was just found guilty of 4 counts of aggravated murder, 2 counts of murder, 1 count of aggravated burglary, 1 count of kidnapping, and 1 count of gross abuse of a corpse. Is this real life right now? What does that even mean, gross abuse of a corpse? Let's not think about it. Well, Ramsey killed 98-year-old Margaret Douglas, which is just so sickening. I mean, poor woman who lived so long only to be murdered. This kid is just sick.
A sentence tonight for the Medina County teenager who broke into the home of a 98-year-old woman, videotaped her sleeping before killing her and her body.
Ramsey was given life in prison.
He left in chains, where he'll remain for life without parole, for the teenager who robbed a 98-year-old from reaching her dream of 100.
Moving into number 2.
The court, having duly considered your offenses, it is hereby ordered that you be committed to the Department of Youth Services until the age of 21, and furthermore committed to the Massachusetts Correctional Institution at Cedar Junction for the period of not less than 25 years.
So that was Philip Chisholm at the age of 14 years old. He was found guilty on many charges. He his 24-year-old math teacher. Chisholm was ordered to serve life in prison without the possibility of parole. He started his sentence at a juvenile facility. Once he turns 21 years old, he's then going to be transferred to a maximum adult prison where he will serve out the rest of his sentence. Chisholm was found guilty on many charges. He was sentenced to 25 years for premeditated murder. Once that sentence is complete, he will then have to serve another sentence of 40 years for armed robbery. Once that sentence is complete, so that's about 65 years at this point, he's going to have another 40-year sentence for armed robbery. After he's done that, he's going to have another 40-year sentence. And it's not done yet. After that sentence, if this teen is still alive at the age of 79 years old, he's going to have to serve his last sentence of so that is another 40 years. This teen will have to become the world's oldest person to be able to be released from prison at the age of 119 years old. Finally, number 1, we have 10-year-old Antonio Barbo, who was charged with killing his great-grandmother in her Wisconsin home. He also had a friend help with the Barbo and his friend decided to try to steal money from 78-year-old Barbara Olson, but things took a turn and a robbery, it turned into a scene. They took turns beating her with a hatchet and hammer.
Sentencing was held today for a teenager convicted in a crime that rattled Sheboygan County and fiercely divided a family. Antonio Barbo learned he'll be a middle-aged man before he gets a chance at parole for killing his great-grandmother.
There doesn't seem to be much remorse, so I'm not sure if this kid will ever get out of prison. After Barbo and his friend committed the murder, they actually decided to go out and enjoy some pizza. These are not behaviors of remorse. Barbo's attorney was shocked when Barbo was given a life sentence. He believes that kids, especially at the age of just 10 years old, shouldn't be given a life sentence. But you know what? If you're capable of doing the crime, then I think you should be old enough, and capable enough to do the time.
Our statutes, the way they're standing right now, 10-year-old facing life in prison, I don't understand that. They aren't adults, they're children.
Let's start off at number 10 with the teenager who you saw in the intro. Well, that was Conrad Schaefer, who was sentenced to life in prison for a double fatal shooting spree that he went on back in 2013. He was sentenced to 2 life terms in prison, but in 25 years he is entitled to have his sentence reviewed and it could be shortened. Something tells me that we shouldn't shorten this teenager's sentencing.
My family and I had no intention to forgive the guilty because of such a heinous and brutal crime that was done to my grandson.
This teen went on a murdering spree, killing as many people as he could, but for some reason he's asking for leniency. I mean, buddy, did you give leniency to all the people that you gunned down? So he asked for leniency, pleading that he is sorry for what he has done.
I know if I was in your position, I'd feel the same way. I was 15 at the time, and I'm really sorry for the things I've done. And I know I did wrong, and I know my apologies don't mean nothing to you. And I know it ain't gonna change how you feel about me. But I just feel like I need to apologize, and I really am sorry for what I've done.
Yeah, I'm totally not buying it. The guy looks like he has no emotions whatsoever on his face. I mean, you ain't sorry. Alright, number 9. This right here is Alyssa Bustamante, and she wrote in a diary, and I quote, "I don't know how to feel at the moment. It was amazing. As soon as you get over the oh my god, it's pretty enjoyable. Is this real life right now? Well, hopefully prison is just as enjoyable because you're gonna be calling that place home for a very long time." She's in there after she committed a murder. Bustamante was raised by her grandparents because her mother had a history of drug and alcohol abuse, which led to charges and jail time, and her father was also in jail. He was in jail for assault, so I guess Alyssa didn't fall too far from the apple tree because she's in prison for life for murdering her 9-year-old neighbor just for the thrill of it. Well, she wrote this: "I just effing killed someone. I strangled them and slit their throat and stabbed them. Now they're dead. I don't know how to feel at the moment. It was kind of amazing." Then she wrote, "I'm kind of nervous and shaky though right now. Okay, I gotta go to church now. LOL. Well, hopefully this teen can have all the time that she needs to, think about her behavior in prison. I think we should give her the rest of her life. Like, give her all the time she needs. From there, let's go to number 8. This is 17-year-old Adrian Zellimer, who pleaded guilty to murder 10-year-old girl who was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole after 40 years. This came after a plea deal. The 17th Judicial District Attorney Dave Young said this: "In 27 years as a prosecutor, I've never seen a 15-year-old commit such a violent act. This attorney must have seen a lot in his days, especially if he's listening to murder cases all day. And for the attorney to come out with a statement like this is insane. How does a 15-year-old even have it in them to, commit such an awful crime?" At number 7, we have Russell Burrell, who pleaded guilty to a murder. He was alongside 3 other people who committed the murder, and he was sentenced to 6 life sentences in prison plus 10 years. He was the teen we talked about in the intro of this video. Burrell murdered 3 people: Shamika Barris, Michael Martin, and Damian Collin. This was a planned murder in order to steal money and drugs.
Let us be clear, 19-year-old Russell Burrell, who was a juvenile at the time of the murders, was the one who emptied 17 rounds into 3 human beings, and today was his last day in civilized society for the rest of his natural life.
Alright, number 6. We have Shane Thompson, who was 17 years old at the time he committed murder, while he was sentenced to 110 years in prison.
And pleaded guilty to 39-year-old Evelyn Njai during a September 25, 2013 robbery attempt at this Rickers BP located on West 38th Street.
So that wasn't the only crime he committed. He was charged and convicted of murder, robbery, and sexual assault.
Prior to that, Thompson broke into the home of this woman and sexually assaulted her while her husband and sons were held at gunpoint.
This is so sickening, it's hard to even read this. This teenager deserved every moment of that 110 years prison sentence. Thompson is obviously not a normal person. When he was sentenced, he seemed pretty happy about it.
The man he killed, Derek Thomas, has that story.
Why is this guy smiling? Number 5.
17-year-old Raceland Martin entered the courtroom handcuffed with his feet in shackles. He sat and appeared to be listening intently to testimony, occasionally nervously looking.
That was 17-year-old Raceland Martin, who murdered his grandfather with a hatchet. Martin was 15 years old when he planned the murder of his grandfather. When this kid was in court, he was shaking like crazy.
The defense, however, arguing his client did not have a normal upbringing, functioning as an adult when he should have been treated like a child.
I don't know if you guys saw that, so let's take a look again.
As an adult when he should have been treated like a child.
Why is this teenager scared now? Martin received a life sentence and he'll spend the rest of his life behind bars. He has a chance of setting the record for being the longest serving inmate in prison because he committed an awful crime at such a young age. And he's not getting out until he passes away in prison. So let's see if he can set the record. Number 4, we actually have someone else who killed an elderly person. This right here is 17-year-old teen who 98-year-old Margaret Douglas. She was in her home when the incident happened, and the teenager tried to hide her body in the closet. In court, he tried to apologize for what he did.
I'm so sorry for what I did. I constantly live in regret and shame because of it.
It's been 9 months since these hands committed those acts on...
The only reason why the teen is apologizing is because his lawyers told him to, in an attempt to get a reduced sentencing. But luckily, it never worked. Those fake tears, the words did nothing for him. He was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. Number 3, we have Savon Shmus, who pleaded guilty to killing his half-sister. Shmus was only 16 years old at the time when he murdered her in their home. He her and dumped her body near a lake so no one can find out. He tried to get away with the crime.
Photos of her smiling face and memories. A young life taken away at the hands of a half-brother who her family says she loved.
He was convicted and sentenced up to 100 years in prison, so because he took a plea deal, he does have a chance of being released from prison when he's 116 years old. This teen has no sympathy whatsoever, so you know what? Why should we? If you can live to 116, then we'll let you out. No problems there. In court, he was asked if he has anything to say, and he just said no. Number 2.
Sharing their thoughts with the teenager who admitted to it all, Aiden Von Grabo.
How do you wish to plead to count 2? Guilty, Your Honor.
Von Grabo taking a guilty plea for first-degree murder and a long list of other crimes, including attempting to Michaela's younger sister.
Why is this teen so evil? This took place in northern Colorado, and the teen was given life in prison. The person he murdered was Michaela Grote, who was just 20 years old. And apparently she wasn't the only one on his death list that he created. I mean, what the heck is that? He had intentions of killing many more people. He was only 16 years old when he was charged with first-degree murder, 3 counts of attempted first-degree murder, murder, attempted first-degree arson, extortion, 2 counts of felony menacing, 3 counts of stalking, 3rd-degree assault of an at-risk person, criminal mischief, and telephone harassment. I mean, that is a mouthful to go through. It's just unbelievable that one person, and I should say not just one person, one teenager was capable of doing. Finally, number 1.
Buffalo teen who killed a man and then set his house on fire to cover up the crime is heading.
Next, we're talking about a 19-year-old kid who spent 20 years to life in prison. He was convicted of murdering 15-year-old Brian Dombick.
19-year-old David Myers may very well spend the rest of his days in a prison cell. He spoke before his sentence, apologizing to his victim's family and his own.
If I could go back and make up for what I did, I would. I'll give arm in the leg.
This might be one teenager who actually felt sorry for what he has done and is willing to deal with the consequences.
I agree. I do deserve to be incarcerated. I committed a crime, and that's all.
So don't get me wrong, I still don't feel bad for him.